Now, the UK's King Charles is due to meet President Trump in Washington later, with ties between the two nations at their lowest in decades. Trump has praised the King as a fantastic man, yet relations with the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, soured over the UK's position on the Iran war, with Trump making headlines for saying Starmer was no Churchill. Now, for more on the foreign and domestic pressures facing the UK, let's bring in Bloomberg's politics reporter Joe Mays and Evie Aspinall, British Foreign Policy Group Director. So thank you both for joining us. Joe, what can we expect from this? First of all, it's quite unusual to see a monarch go to the US. It feels more political. This feels like trying to make a bridge and a friendship between the two nations.
Yeah, you're right. It hasn't happened since 2007, the late Queen Elizabeth II. And the real stated reason for this trip is that we're commemorating the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. And so, if anything, the King and Keir Starmer are actually trying to downplay the political significance of this moment as not a political moment, more a kind of historic commemorative moment. But nevertheless, politics are still going to be front and centre of all of our minds. And what you really think the hope is that after this trip, we can see some mending of that relationship between the US and the UK, which, as you say, is at its worst state in decades. And usually it comes down to the monarch and the royals who can, in these difficult times, make those positive connections and bridges. I think that's the real hope.
Evie, talk to me a little bit about, how do you think the relationship between the UK and the US is? I mean, we talk about a rough patch. Is that an understatement?
I think in many ways it's an understatement. I think we are at a very difficult time in UK-US relations. The Iran war is kind of a very stark reminder of that, of how different the views of the two sides are. But it's a broader trend we're seeing too, where the US is pulling back from Europe, it's retrenching on the world stage, and that's a concern for the UK across the board, even kind of predating and after Trump as well. So we've got a broader trend of this kind of fracturing of UK-US relations.
But Joe, why is this? I mean, it feels like it's a lot because of societal matters, right? Freedom of speech, some of the things that maybe, people close to Keir Starmer also stood for when they went to trying to curb X and some of the powers there. Is it more about that, or is it about trade and what's happening in Hormuz?
I think it is the big picture issues, especially the Iran conflict, the UK not taking a more aggressive stance, but then also President Trump attacking the Chagos Islands deal. That's caused tensions as well. And yes, talking about perhaps unpicking the trade pact that he signed, to such great fanfare with the UK, that's playing as well. But you're right, X as well, Elon Musk. There's a long list now of areas where there's been tension and disagreement between the UK and the US. And the difference here is that previous presidents might have tried to ally over things and prioritize the relationship. Trump isn't doing that. Trump is very happy to publicly criticize, as is his modus operandi. And that's why we're in this new realm of real tension in the relationship, which hasn't existed for such a long time.
But Joe, do you feel like it's really aimed at the UK? I mean, we've seen also President Trump making fun of Emmanuel Macron. Is it across the board, or do you think he's really taking aim at the UK?
I think it is across the board, and what comes down to a bit of a disdain towards Europe writ large, and especially the question on defence and how Trump feels like Europe as a piece, and NATO especially, has not been doing enough to support its own security, and clearly the UK is part of that group. We recognise also that they come from different political leanings. So as you have Starmer, a kind of centre-left, traditional, statist British politician, against a President Trump, clearly from the right, entrepreneurial, corporate worldview, and that's causing lots of these clashes as well. Plus the American exceptionism, which we all know very well from President Trump, is a real recipe for what has become this real fracturing in the relationship.
Evie, when the US president says, look, the UK might have to learn for itself, to fight for itself, I mean, this is questioning one of the US's deepest alliance, but do you have to take it at face value?
I mean, I think there's a broader question as well that goes beyond Trump, that actually we've consistently seen the US wants Europe and the UK to scale up its military capabilities. The world has become more fractured, particularly in the last sort of 5 years or so. And so the UK really does have to scale up those challenges. I think Trump reasonably wants the UK to do that, and I think the UK will and is starting to take quite seriously the questions of its own security and defence beyond the US. The question is how US remains involved in NATO and how much it is willing to support the UK and Europe more broadly on its defence and security moving forwards. And that's where the concerns start to arise.
How would the president see Keir Starmer's commitment to trying and protect the Strait of Hormuz?
I mean, it's not entirely clear what Trump wants on the Strait, so let alone what he wants the UK to do. I think, I mean, in the earlier stances, he wanted much stronger commitment. He wanted much closer military cooperation when it came to the Strait. I think it's been quite clear that the UK won't do that. And I think the US actually broadly now accepts, whether it will say it publicly or not, that the UK won't do much more to support the US in the region. What the UK will be offering is opportunities to help reopen the Strait, to help trade move more freely moving forwards afterwards once it's reopened.
Evie, I mean, how does the Mandelson scandal also play into this? I mean, you have a severely weakened prime minister here, but also Mandelson was ambassador to the US. Yeah,
and I'm surprised you've not seen more made out of the Mandelson scandal here in the UK and what it means for US relations. We've seen it as a kind of a big domestic issue in terms of the prime minister's stability within his role, but actually in terms of that transatlantic relationship, there are genuine questions the United States can and will probably be asking behind the scenes at the least about the UK's vetting procedures, about how this was allowed to happen, and whether they can trust the next ambassador or the next leader to be properly vetted and to be aligned with the UK-US relationship. So there are genuine concerns I think the US can be raising about the UK and how this was allowed to happen.
Joe, is this also one of the reasons why it's really the king, of course, a monarch that has maybe more of an appeal than a prime minister, but also it is because the prime minister, Keir Starmer, is severely weakened now?
Yes, if you wanted to pick someone to go to speak to President Trump to try and improve the UK-US relationship, you'd rather King Charles than Keir Starmer because of all the reasons we've just discussed and the fact there is a genuine warmth between the president and the king. So that acts in the UK's favour here. But I think that, just picking up from that previous discussion, the Mandelson saga will continue today in Westminster. There could be a vote on whether Keir Starmer has to face a parliamentary probe, whether he misled Parliament. So that's still to come. Tuesday, we have more testimony from his former Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, the former Foreign Office Chief, Philip Barton. That could lead to more revelations as well. And all this will be going on while King Charles is in the US with President Trump. So what a backdrop to that visit. It's going to be absolutely fascinating to see how it plays out.
Joe, and it's a big, I mean, they have a bilateral meeting with President Trump. This is the King and Queen Camilla. Then they have a White House banquet, and then they have a speech to a joint session of Congress during his 4-day visit. How does a king actually measure success?
I think quite simply, does he avoid a embarrassing moment with President Trump? I mean, the bar is pretty low, but that would be such a scandal and so damaging to the standing of the relationship, to what the UK wants out of it. I think that is a low bar, but a very important bar. Can you avoid King Charles being sat next to President Trump while he makes some kind of controversial comment that's against the UK or Britain? I think if they can avoid that, they'll come home happy for sure.
Do you think, I mean, Evie, again, is it more of a feel-good, just that, the two men need to get along and have a laugh, rather than behind the scenes some kind of, diplomatic negotiation? Yeah,
I think as much as anything, this is about trying to reset the relationship. And actually, because the relationship's got so bad in the last month or so, there was a big question about whether the king should still go, and the decision was made that he should, not least because of the optics of cancelling the visit were too bad. But in many ways, as Joe alludes to, it's a risk aversion strategy. We want to make sure that nothing bad happens while he's there, and maybe it feels a bit fluffy, but nothing tangible or practical is going to come from this.
OK, thank you both for joining us. Evie Aspinall, British Foreign Policy Group Director, and Joe Mays from Bloomberg.